Hello, this is our first video. I'm going to show you how to do the gradient in black and white. So here I've got my setup. I've got a cup for water for rinsing my brush. I've got a paper towel to dry my brush off. I've got a white piece of paper with a piece of wax paper over it. I tape the wax paper to the table, and that gives me a nice palette on which I can see my paints. I've got my black paint and my white paint, and this is where I'm going to paint my swatches on my sketchbook. You want to use the paper that is much thinner. You have two types of paper in your kit, and you want to use the paper that is thin and that is 9 by 12 inches. So, first, put my brush in the water, take off the excess water, and see how the consistency of my paint is. So, good consistency there. Sometimes people say you want the consistency of mayonnaise. You don't want your paint too thin and watery. You also don't want it too thick. You want the brush to be able to pick it up. So I'm going to start and do my white swatch. A few strokes that way and a few strokes that way, and that's that. Then I'm going to take a little bit of black and add it to my mixture. And you see how I kind of work it around, and this is very gradually changing the color here. And then I'm going to make another swatch that's a light gray. I'm adding a little bit more, and so on. So at any point during this video you can pause it and catch up with me wherever I am. At some points I'll make mistakes and I'll be able to talk through those so that when you make mistakes you'll be able to know what to do with those mistakes. Acrylic paint dries very quickly, so you want to make sure that you're not taking too long to do anything, but you also don't want to rush through the process. If your paint starts to dry out, some people like to keep a little squirt bottle close by. I like to just add a little bit of water. Many people like to use a palette knife, but I've found in this class it's easier to just kind of mix things with my brush instead of getting into the whole palette knife thing. So you see how very slowly I'm working from white to gray. Oop, I might have gone a little too far here. The reason we add the black to the white is because the black is a very strong pigment and the white is a very weak pigment. So if you add a little bit of white to black, you're not going to notice it. But if you add a little bit of black to white, you probably will. So I like to go in a kind of snake pattern so that I can see how everything comes together. In the end, you're going to have seven steps of the gradient, but they should all be evenly spaced. So the more you can have for choices, the happier you will be. And you can see I'm kind of running out of paint. And it might even be starting to dry up. If you're lucky, you'll get through the whole thing without having that happen, but you've got to be really lucky. It's drying out a little bit, so I'm going to add just a little bit more water. And again, I want to remind you, this is the part of the course in which you're going to feel like you're doing chemistry more than art. But going through this process will really help you with your craftsmanship. It'll help you understand how colors are formed and all the different steps between each color. Now I'm kind of running out of paint there, so I'm going to add some more white. I'm using a slightly different brand of paint because I'm running out of the other paint. Hopefully that won't confuse you, just using a slightly different brand. It shouldn't make much of a difference with the grayscale. So I'm just putting it right in that same puddle, that same mixture, and I'm going to try to match the paint, the color, and the value so that I can keep going. Feeling like I need a little more water. And at first when you're painting, you're going to notice that you gotta like think through every single little step, and you're like, what's going on? Why is it too liquidy, or why is it too congealed? But then as you get used to using the paint, you'll learn more and more about how it all works. You want to make sure you use enough paint to get the desired effect, but not so much paint that you've got like a gallon of paint that you're wasting. There will be a few places where it'll seem to really slow down. Like here, we were adding little bits of paint and you could see every little bit. But then here, around this value, you're going to notice that you need to add a little bit more paint to actually see any kind of change happening. I'm trying to make sure that I've got swatches that are 1 inch by 1 inch. And you notice that I don't mess around with things too much. I don't kind of go back and forth, and I don't try to touch up little bits. I try not to do that because that kind of messes things up. That might be a little too much paint. Let's see what happens here. So you see that changed things rather quickly. But I think it's not too far out. At some point the wax paper will break down and you will start to just brush right through the wax paper. So try to have that happen near the end of your continuum so it doesn't screw you up. The more organized you are with this color wheel, the easier things are going to be. So try to spend some time on your first few continuums so that you can really be in charge of what the paint is doing. And then you'll be able to have much more control with the other continuums. But the grayscale might take a while. Really use that critical voice, figure out what's working, what isn't working. So I'm going to make some kind of large jumps here. Getting close to some very dark grays. So let's just get one more dark gray here. And then I'll make a just straight black. Amazingly, this all worked out so that it was on one paper. That's not always the way it works, so don't be upset if it doesn't work out that perfectly for you. You might have a few papers, but I've been doing this a few years. So sometimes I have an extra piece of paper that I'm just putting my excess paint on. My idea is that someday I'll use all of these painted papers in some masterpiece of a collage, but who knows, I might not. So remember that wet paint is considered hazardous waste, or at least wet acrylic paint is considered hazardous waste. However, once the paint is dry, it's not considered hazardous waste. So you want to let anything that you're going to throw away, let it dry a little bit. And that should be fine. It won't be hazardous waste. Whenever I wash off my brush, I try to wipe it off on the paper towel first, and then I swish it around in the water and clean it off a little bit. So you see that's getting pretty clean, pretty good there. And then we get a little extra paint. Oop, that's a lot or a little. And get this to be the right consistency. The black, if any white is in it, it's not going to be black. So that's why I want to have just one black swatch. Just plain black. I'm going to make it big. Sometimes I need some extra black swatches. I want to have it there if I need it. There. Okay, so that is the painting part. Now I'm going to use up my extra paint, paint a little painting. I just like to paint it out on paper. I don't think I actually like to paint anything. And I can use this paint up a little bit if I'd like to. So, what do I do to clean off my brush? Wipe it off on the paper towel. Swish it around in the water. See how we're doing. And then if you are working in the art building and you want to clean your brush more, you'd go down to room 207 and wash it with soap and water. The water, if you're working at home, can just be thrown down the drain. Hazardous material at your house is different than hazardous material on federal property. So if you're working at home, just put the water down the drain. If you're working at school, this water should go in the dirty paint water bucket or in the place down the hall in room 207 where I dump all the acrylic paint waste. We looked at that on the first day of class. So hopefully that helps you understand how you do that first continuum. And I'll show you how to put the grayscale together in another video.